Mike and Andy here, or as we like to refer to you sometimes, Internet, we call you the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
And we're delighted you're with us, and thank you. We passed, Andy tells me, last week in real time. I don't know when you're going to listen to this, but to us last week, we passed 100,000 downloads.
Right, we're a 6-digit company now.
We are 6 digits. So that's very exciting and very honoring. And so we're thrilled that you're a part of our online community. And today's been a bad day. It's been a bad day. We're recording this on Good Friday, 2016, and it's been a bad day because I discovered something that, you know, if you're going to discover a sin, I mean, I guess Good Friday is a good day to do that.
Yeah.
But I recently discovered, and this is, I mean, it's tough. We don't want to overshare, but we don't want to undershare either. And so we want to be real. You know, that's one of the values we have for Vox. And so I discovered that my wife bought, and not only purchased, like spent our money, which is God's money on, but enjoys Justin Bieber's new album. And
oh, a new enemy of the music industry is unfolding.
Well, I just thought, it makes me yearn for the days of Adele. I mean, really? So my 10-year-old daughter is watching her 44-year-old mom singing, "If you don't like what you're then baby, you just didn't love yourself." What's that even mean? That's just dumb. That's dumb. So I'm sad. And my sadness is reflecting in our choice of topic today for podcasting, because, you know, I thought when we got married that her job as my wife was to like the things I like. And I've failed miserably as part of that. So we want to talk today, Andy, about the myth of this idea of a soulmate. Right. So the myth of the one. Because I've heard people, and I used it for a while, you know, she's the one or he's the one. And there's this sense, and it's brutally present in Christian circles. Like there's this one person that God has for you. And I want to blow the crap out of that. All right? Because I've clearly not married her. All right? If that's true, if there is the one, then I messed it up. And that means if everyone only has one person they're supposed to marry, then I have single-handedly ruined the one for everybody else. Yeah. Right? Because if one's off, then the rest of the world is toast. So I want to talk a little bit about this, and I want to talk about where this comes from, and it doesn't matter if you're listening and you're a non-Bible person, and there are a lot of you listening, which we absolutely love. There's still a Hollywood fiction that talks about this kind of falling in love idea, and if you're a Jesus follower, then this is like part of the Christian subculture that just, it needs to be shot, because it's not a biblical idea. And it is one of many instances when it comes to love and sexuality where Jesus followers are way more engaged with things outside the scriptures than with things inside. So I want to talk a little bit. So this stuff is part of a conversation that we'll be having. And what you're noticing is that we'll start a conversation and move away and come back to it. And so We've got lots of conversation topics hanging in the air, but in light of my wife's transgressions, we thought the myth of the soulmate was appropriate kind of response. So there is ample warrant in the scriptures for the idea that every single couple will have irreconcilable differences. So it's not like there are some couples that have irreconcilable differences and the rest of us are okay. Nope, every couple does. And this takes us back to the book of Genesis. And so, again, if you're not a Bible person, you're not into talking snakes, and you don't believe Adam and Eve, and that's fine. There's wisdom here. I take this stuff seriously because Jesus took it seriously. But for you, I think there's still good stuff to learn. The biblical account opens with a book called Genesis or Origins. And it presents, in its first chapter, presents a God who is literally speaking things into existence. And so let there be light, and there was light, and let there be sky, and there was sky. And it's really, we'll do a whole series someday on Genesis 1 because it's so beautiful and it's so subversive. But you get to a point in the narrative where God says, let us make humanity in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock, over all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created humanity, singular, in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, plural. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, and over every living creature. So, first of all, the word rule, when we say subdue it or rule over it, those are not words in Hebrew that have the connotation of pollute it and strip mine it. No, these are exercise God's benevolent care and channel his blessing over the created order as God's almost vice regents or governors or co-rulers or partners. That's the idea. So this God that creates everything now entrusts his creation to landlords. They're not owners, they're property managers. And so this man and this woman were made in God's image and likeness, and those are important words we'll talk about at another podcast. But they are absolute equality words. So both the man and the woman are made in God's image and God's likeness, and they were made as partners to affect the mandate that God had given them to fill the earth, which means having sex, and the rabbis love this. The first command in the whole Bible, of the 613 commands of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, the first command is have sex, which is awesome. And we'll get to a theology of sexuality in another podcast. But here, man and woman were given work to do, and they were to do it in partnership as image bearers. Now, the scene shifts in Genesis chapter 2, and it almost feels like a different or contradictory account, but the two chapters relate to each other in an interesting way, which will be another topic for future podcasts. And so the man is created, this Adam. So one of the things we'll get to when we talk about women in the church and what their roles can and can't be is the fact that in Genesis 1, the word Adam or Adam can be a proper name, it can be a generic term for a gendered male, or it can just mean mankind, humanity. Yeah. And it's super confusing about which is which. And so much debate goes on. Okay, so when did Adam become a male? Was he always, so we'll talk about that later. But so in the account in chapter 2, the man and the woman are created separately. And so in Genesis 2, verse 7, the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground, which is an interesting Hebrew wordplay because the word for ground is Adama and the word for man is Adam, which means the man was named in relationship to the ground. So literally earthling or dirt being.
We were made as a dirty being.
Yeah, exactly. And to which all 12-year-old boys said yes.
Yes.
The Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Then it says that God saw that it was not good that the man was alone. And so, so verse 18, the Lord God said, it is not good for a man to be alone, which is striking in Hebrew because in chapter 1, at the end of every section of creation, the statement is made, it is good, it is good, it is good. And then here in chapter 2, there's something not good, namely that the man is alone. And so the animals are paraded before God, and God says, I will make a helper suitable for him. Now, this is horrible in English because it sounds like the man needs an administrative assistant. I will make a helper suitable for him. Right? The word helper, it's awful. All right, it is an awful translation of the word ezer or ezer. I've heard it pronounced both ways. I'm going to pronounce it ezer. The word ezer, with one exception, is used of God coming to the rescue of his people. So the word is a rescuer.
Ooh.
The word is ally.
Come on.
It's when God. So when it says, like the psalmist says, "I lift my eyes up to the mountains. Where does my help come from?" It's ezer. That my help, my ezer, comes from you, God. You are my ezer. So the idea is this is not an inferior word. This is actually a rescuer word. All right. So it's a really strong ally word. All right. But the word suitable is the word that's way interesting. The word suitable is the word kenegdo. So God says, I will make an ezer kenegdo for him. Now, ezer obviously is ally, but kenegdo is connection of a couple of words. And here's what the word means. I will make an alike opposite the man. So counterpart is a decent synonym, but the word literally means an alike opposite. Someone who is like the man and someone who is opposite from the man. All right, so you think of, and I don't have a good metaphor, but perhaps the picture of a puzzle. So if you have two puzzle pieces, they have to be from the same puzzle in order to fit together, but they have to be differently shaped so that they fit. Mm-hmm. And so the idea, I think, is that male and female were to fit together as ezer kenegdo. So total equals, no hierarchy at all, in partnership as image bearers, and that she and he were alike opposites. All right, makes sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay, now.
Fascinating.
Oh, sure. And we're going to talk, this is like we're skipping such good stuff. So so God parades all the animals in front of the Adam, and this is really important because the whole point in chapter 1 and chapter 2 is that human beings are not like the animals. That's the big point. And so God's not doing this because he's like, hey, the dogs look attractive, or how about cats or mammals? No. This is something far more significant. It's reinforcing to Adam that only another image bearer is an ezer kenegdo. So the text says that God takes part of the man's side and forms that side into a woman. Now, and again, if you're here and you're going, man, really? Okay, I got it. But just hang in there. Yeah. All right, because there's a punchline coming. So the the Lord God made a woman from the side he'd taken out of the man. He brought her to the man, and then the man says, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. And it's another word play. Well, a gendered male, another word for that is ish, and a woman is isha. So again, it's another wordplay. So the man was named in relationship to the ground. The woman was named in relationship to the man. They each reflect their origin, in other words, which is interesting. And then the text says this. That is why, because they are now ezer kenegdo, that is why a man leaves his father and mother, is united to his wife, the two become one flesh, and we'll talk about that later. Adam and his wife, so now they're married, interestingly enough, were both naked, they felt no shame. So the image you get of male, female relating together is one of absolute quality, absolute partnership, absolute co-reigning kind of under God's benevolent rule and expressing that benevolent rulership over the created world. All right, so that's the picture. That lasts for all of 2 chapters. And then this man, this woman listen to a talking snake. The talking snakes tempts them to eat fruit from which God said, don't eat the fruit from that tree, this particular tree. And there's this temptation sort of narrative that's really kind of insightful. But what happens is the first man and the first woman enter into disobedience because they were commanded not, they could have the fruit of any other tree, but this one tree was a no. In a garden full of yes, there was one no. And so, of course, they run to the no. What God does then in response is he speaks what will now be true, that sin and death and rebellion have entered the world. And so he speaks to the serpent, and then he speaks to the woman. And this is really interesting. He says to the woman, in chapter 3, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. And so the idea is the woman was the one through whom the earth would be filled. And so God frustrates that, interestingly enough. And then he says, your desire will be for your husband, and your husband will rule over you. Ooh, now, oh man, this is a whole other podcast. I mean, we're just chiming. I'm sorry to be so
We're
annoying.
laying out the next 6 months of podcasts.
Exactly. So God, this is not God's preference. This is not God, the way God created things. This is not his intention. God created an Erre Kenegdo. But now he says instead of that, there's going to be a power struggle. Because the word desire here is the word that's used to master. And the word used for rule is the word used to describe the way a king would rule or try to dominate his subjects. So you have, and again, not to gender stereotype, but any, I think, couple in relationship would say, yeah, they're power issues so money and sex are two of the most common ones. Why? Because they're actually power issues. They're not money and sex issues. And so instead of Erre Kenegdo, now you've got two people who will both try to rule over the other, right? To get their way. They're each now bent not towards benevolence and rulership, but bent towards selfish getting what they want. And then God curses the ground. Now it's interesting, right? What was the Adam named after?
Yeah, dirt.
The dirt.
Yeah.
So what does God curse?
The dirt.
He curses the dirt. That now the dirt won't cooperate. Now he's got to sweat. It's painful toil. Instead of rule and subdue, now it's through painful toil you will earn, you will carve your way out. So creation now is affected too. So the idea is that because of disobedience, that things are now fallen. They're good, but they're not as good as they could be. And so we see many instances of beauty and truth and goodness and love. And those things are all good and true and beautiful. But we also see that even in those instances, there are still specks of darkness. There are still echoes of the fact that, yes, that it should be like that all the time. You know, I mean, all this protest against the inequalities of human life. I mean, that's all coming from the instinctual awareness that things aren't as they should be. So, how does this relate to soulmates?
Yeah.
Well, all right. Are you ready?
I am.
All right. There was a study done in 2002, and the topic of the study was answering the question why men don't commit. All right. So do you think since 2002 men commit more or less?
Less.
Right. So I don't know that this study really helped anybody, but it was interesting because there was a paradox at the heart of the study. The reason the men said in this particular study that they did not commit was because that they were looking for a soulmate. All right? And here's how they defined a soulmate. Now, this is key. Here's how they defined it. The first and lesser important of the two qualifications for a soulmate was sexual chemistry and compatibility. And obviously, I mean, that's all something we would want. But the second part is the really interesting part. The more important part of the definition of a soulmate was that they were holding out for someone who was compatible with them. Now, that sounds good until you unpack what compatible means. Compatible, in this case, according to these gentlemen, meant someone who was low maintenance, someone who liked them as they were and wouldn't require them to change. Okay? Someone who didn't have a bunch of baggage herself, and someone who had very little emotional neediness. Okay? So, brothers and sisters of the internet, I have great news. I have great news for you. No such person exists. If you are holding out for somebody who you call a soulmate, and by soulmate you mean they complete me, they make me happy, they bring fulfillment into my life, no such person exists. Why? First, they're an Erre conegno, meaning the person you will end up marrying will be different than you by definition. And then secondly, under the fall, under the fallenness that infects every human heart, that means that difference will now be bent towards selfish ends, not other-centered ends. And so what you have is this beautiful train wreck of expectation that people are not getting married because they're waiting for the one, and at the same time the recognition that there is no such thing. There maybe the one, the soulmates we all yearn for live with the unicorns and the leprechauns. Yeah. You know what I mean? There is no such thing. I love the way one writer puts it. This is absolutely genius. This is a guy named Stanley Hauerwas. So he's an ethicist and a social commentator. He has this great line. He says, "Destructive to marriage is the self-fulfillment ethic that assumes marriage and the family are the primary institutions of personal fulfillment." Now, pause. Okay. Why people get married, and it could be, civil unions between gay people. It can be marriages that are church sanctioned. It could be marriages that are, we're on the beach or we've lived together 7 years. That it's kind of irrelevant. All right. This is not just a conversation about quote unquote Christian, whatever, traditional marriage. The thing that is so funny is that the reason people get married now has changed so dramatically over the last, compared to the last 2,000 years. The reason people got married is you got married for cultural reasons. You got married for social reasons because that's what everyone was doing. You got married to produce children. You got married for lots of other reasons than I want to be happy. Yeah. All right. So that's shifted in the last 40 years. The reasons people get married now, they get married now as expressions of self-fulfillment, right? That's what soulmate means. That I'm getting married to meet needs in my life. Now, he says, and it's so true, destructive to marriage is the self-fulfillment ethic that assumes that marriage and family exist for me and my emotional wants and desires. He says the assumption, so this is Hauerwas again, the assumption is that there is someone just right for us to marry, and that if we look closely enough, we will find the right person. This moral assumption overlooks a crucial aspect to marriage. It fails to appreciate the fact that we will always marry the wrong person. There is no such thing. Now, on a graded scale, there is more wisdom and less wisdom, right? So there are people who are more likely to be good matches, and there are people who are less likely to be good matches. But the point is, defining what a good match has to be rethought from the start. Because if good match means this is the person that's going to complete me, this is the person that's going to love me, this is the person, it's all for me. Yeah. I'm just loving myself through this other person. See, marriage becomes fulfilling when you actually begin to believe that there's a higher purpose than your fulfillment. And then, and only then, does marriage become fulfilling. It's ironic. It's what Jesus says. If you want to save your life, you've got to lose it, right? It's the same thing. If you want to find fulfillment in your marriage, you have to abandon the idea that your marriage is there for fulfillment. Yeah. And when you do that you're there the reason you're married is to grow in love, to grow in holiness, to grow in sacrifice, to grow in service, to grow in giving yourself away, to grow and to have those parts of you chiseled away that are the painful, ugly parts, to be healed from things in your past. I mean, all of this, like the bigger reasons. And in the Christian idea of marriage exists to be a picture of the relationship between the way God loves people. Yeah. If you buy that whole train of thought and abandon the idea that there's one person out there that you'll never argue, you'll never fight, you'll never have seasons of deep disappointment or deep pain, that somehow if you just chosen differently, you could avoid all of that. That is the biggest myth that is so destructive in Christian marriages and elsewhere, right? The myth of the soulmate. There is no such thing as the one person for you. Now, some Christians will say, yeah, but in the Bible, right, there are a couple of times where God like picks out a person.
Yeah.
Right? Those are Old Testament stories, and they all have to do with the messianic line promised through Abraham's descendants. That's the only reason those things were so specific. There is nothing else, not one speck of teaching anywhere in the Bible that suggests that there's one person for you. Not one. There is no Hollywood. In fact, the word love, the highest word for love, has nothing to do with feeling. It's an action word. Yeah. Right? It's the choosing of covenant love. I mean, listen, we've swallowed hook, line, and sinker this happily ever after thing, and it is so not true. And so the temptation now with social media, you can be in touch with people from years ago. The temptation, of course, is to think, well, if I'd just chosen differently, I would be happier. And because happiness is now the greatest goal, well, then of course we have irreconcilable differences. And I think the Bible and I think wisdom say that there are times when divorce is the least worst option. All right? But the majority of the divorces that I'm personally familiar with all come from a place where, or I should say most of them come from a place, well, I just wasn't being fulfilled. And you can dress that up in very spiritual language, but that's what it comes down to. I believe that someone else could fulfill me better than you. And so when you kind of operate from that point of view, well, then of course, exchanging partners or having an affair or the adrenaline rush of, flirting with somebody, I mean, of course you're going to run that way if you're the center of the thing. If something else is the center of the thing, well, then great. See, the issue with marriage is this, and Hauerwas goes on, he says, we never know who we really marry. We just think we do. Or even if we marry the right person, just give it a while and he or she will change. For marriage, being what it is, means we are not the same person after we have entered it. The primary problem is learning how to love and care for the stranger to whom you find yourself married. So, the Bible's instruction to husbands and wives has to do with now finding again the ezer kenegdo-ness of marriage. And so that's why Paul will talk about husbands, respect your wives, give yourself up for them, serve them, because that's what Jesus does to the church. And wives, submit. And that word, we'll have a whole session on that word. That word comes after a verse that says, submit yourselves to each other as you do in Christ. And then it will say, wives, do this to your husbands. It doesn't even say the word submit again. It never says wives, submit to your husbands. It just says wives, to your husbands. And the idea of submission is simply placing your well-being under the well-being of someone else's. That's it. That's what it means. It doesn't mean doormat. It doesn't mean benevolent dictatorship. It just means the predominant practice of every Jesus follower is to put the well-being of others ahead of their own. That's it.
Which seems to me would line up so much with the idea of rescuer, right? Like if what we're talking about, like if it's, I mean, it's interesting.
That's what we're going back
Yeah,
for.
because I think about the first image that comes to mind is like obviously like a Coast Guard. It's kind of like, that still seems very authoritative rescuing. It doesn't seem like submissive rescue.
Right.
Which is very the subversive approach, obviously. Is like, if we allow to go into a helping circumstance for someone else, put aside everything we're bringing to the table just to be available, to listen, to be graceful. Come on. That can become the most life-bearing and rescuing thing we could do.
That's right. When do you really enjoy your children? When you have not made them the center of your universe, right? I mean, that's when you really enjoy them. When do you enjoy your marriage? When you haven't made it the center of your universe. I mean, this is just how it works. It's God's genius in cursing us the way that he's cursed us. And I don't mean curse in the bad sense. I mean, it's an exercise of mercy in this instance. What God did in Genesis 3 was he made it impossible for anything to ultimately fulfill us. That's what cursing the relationship between man and woman did. That's what cursing the ground did. That, we have momentary seasons of satisfaction where I got a promotion, or I've got a report card, or I get the doctorate. But after a while, none of those things ultimately satisfied. Not one of them. No new affair, no new relationship. I mean, those are great momentary highs, but none of them ultimately satisfy. And the reason they don't is because God designed the world now to keep us hungry and thirsty, so that we're always looking for something else. Because he's using our own self-interest against him. Or no, he's using our own self-interest against us, is what I mean to say. And so he keeps us hungry and thirsty for more and more and more, until ultimately, because no one comes to Jesus and just goes, hey, I just was convinced Jesus was the Alpha and the Omega, just one day. No, you're broken, or you're sick, or you're desperate, or you're empty, right? That's so God's a genius, but the way the world works now between men and women, between spouses, partners, whatever word you want to use, is that no partnership will ever be truly fulfilling. There is no soulmate that's out there. If by soulmate we mean someone that's going to fulfill me personally, and there is nobody. So this isn't terribly romantic when I do teachings on this, and you can kind of hear people sort of bummed, because there is something about that fiction that is very, very appealing, right? But it's so damaging, and it's damaging on both ends of the marriage decision. So on the one hand, it keeps people from getting married, ironically, because they have such a high view that no real person could possibly ever fulfill. So they just stay single. But then when they get married, for whatever reason they get married, now they're set up for disappointment, because all of the work they thought they did to find the one will be shown to be fruitless. Why? Because there's no such person. Now, a guy named Tim Keller, who's a pastor in New York, wrote a really great book on marriage. And he says, marriage, the reason marriage, the reason you cannot believe that it's the other person that's wrong, and that if you just swapped out another one, it'd be better. The reason you can't believe that is because marriage does two things that are inescapable. It has the power of truth, is the first thing he says. And what that means is the power of truth means that anytime that your life is put in proximity with another person who themselves has a bit of darkness in them, anytime you are put in such proximity with somebody like that, the what marriage will do is reflect your heart. It will show you your heart. It will show you, I didn't think I was as selfish as I was until I got married. I did not think I was as mean as I was until I got married, right? I mean, there's this sense that it has the power to totally reveal us. And swapping out a partner doesn't change the nature of the arrangement. It's the arrangement that does this, not the partner.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yep.
And so the arrangement of putting two sinners in close proximity reveals all of this junk. And so swapping out partners doesn't do a thing. And it's so funny. It's so funny to realize wherever, like our recovery brothers and sisters say, wherever you go, there you are. Right? Whatever baggage you're bringing into this one, well, it's just going to be baggage in the next one too, because you're there. And so you say, okay, all right. Well, the second great power that Keller mentions is the power of love. And this is why we all undergo this. Because some of our listeners might be going, you know what, dude, no way. But paradoxically again, what I've learned in my marriage through the hard stuff, I was a total jerk there, or man, I can't believe how selfish my heart is, or my goodness, I'm so disappointed because she's not fulfilling X or Y or Z or whatever. The redemptive power of marriage to heal old wounds, to be loved in the midst of our brokenness, in God's grace to almost like remediate what our self-image is and could be. And I mean, there's so much power there, but the power is for good or bad. And so we just see the carnage all around us, right? And we think, well, the answer then has to be, we've got to pick rightly. And certainly we're not just saying, hey, just marry the first person you meet and good luck. That it will all suck. So just go ahead and embrace the suck. We're not. No. There's wisdom, absolutely. And so great wisdom in spending lots of time together and the ups and the downs. Great wisdom in moving slow. Great wisdom in all those things. But what we are saying is, even if you do the process right, there's still going to be that moment when you wake up and go, my God, what have I done? There just is that moment. Yeah. And for me, this has been totally liberating, because what it's done, it's taken the focus off of my wife, because that's where I want to put the focus. Here are all the things that she needs to do. And that's not true at all, because the focus should be on yours truly, right? And all the ways I fall short, all the ways that I could love better. But even focused on me isn't the right thing. See, what Jesus wants to do in marriages of two Christ followers is to use that as the furnace of transformation, where you get to like practice loving your enemy and blessing those who persecute you, and serving, and
marriage becomes the crucible pot for all things.
For some seasons, it does.
Yeah,
absolutely, it does. Because you will. I mean, how long have you been married?
5.5 years, almost 6 in June.
You're a rookie.
I know.
You don't know
so green.
anything.
So green.
Yeah, and we've only been married 16, so it's not like I got it figured out. But it's funny because, as Justina and I do this thing called marriage together, we have found so much joy on the other side of. We found, it's my family is the most fulfilling part of my life, but it's not because they meet my needs. It's because I've worked hard to abandon the demand that they have to. And in that case, now it's just so rich, right? That's the point. That's the genius. And it works everywhere. It works in your relationship with God. It works in your relationship with people. It works. This is why Jesus will simply walk around saying, everything's upside down in my kingdom. If you want to gain, you've got to lose. If you want to find, you've got to seek. You
to be first, you got to become last.
Yes, it's just all of the. Thank you. I knew there was another good one that was out there. So that's the big one, Andy. That's the big one. And for me, a huge part of this was therapy. So I went to see a counselor, a therapist, for 18 months. And at first it was all about me. And then it became about how I treated my wife and what that said about me. And dude, for another podcast, oh my word, did my world just get wrecked by the realization of the ways that I would shame my wife for not being more like me. Oh my word, I had to do so much repenting. So that's for a future day. But we wanted just to change it up. We'd done women in ministry, and then we had this wonderful conversation about Down syndrome. And thanks for the great feedback on that. So much fun. Oh my goodness. So we thought we'd start into a little bit of relationship stuff, and certainly not as experts.
no way. But I think even more so. Like my marriage is super green, and we're down in the trenches, right now. Like we got 2 young kids, and every day feels new and feels like process. And I think that's definitely the one thing I've come to learn over 6 years is that I chose a process, not an answer, to who I am. And I totally affirm the times where I feel I'm able to let go the most of myself and not let my fulfillment be based on my kids, be based on my wife, and that.
Come on.
Does Jesus reveal himself most? Do I feel the most fulfilled? Do I experience the most joy? And and even learning how to do that is not easy.
No,
it's so difficult.
It's horrific.
And, it's like we've talked about before. It's like it's a covenant That's a promise that exposes us, not this contractual agreement of if you do this way, I will be fulfilled and treat you well, but rather, I'm promising this life to you, and in that I need to expose myself so we can grow as one instead of two independent people that are full of joy and so on and so forth. But
well, I mean, we'll close with this anecdote. How long are we, Andy?
We're at 41 minutes.
Okay. All right. I told him half an hour.
Hey, we went longer, and there's people out there who wanted longer.
Way more want longer.
Yeah.
Way more.
Yep.
Gene, you wanted 30. Well, you've been outvoted. So my wife and I were filling out this premarital questionnaire, and some of you have heard this story, and it's absolutely true. And the question was, but we were going into premarital counseling, and the question was, how many times a week do you think you will have sex? And I put, as a man who had never gone all the way at 29, I put 15 times a week, twice a day and 3 on the Sabbath. And I meant it. And I thought, I can sustain that. I got some time to make up.
It's all about what you can do.
Exactly. I think a fluid replacement is going to be key there. The hamstring. So I just thought, I thought my wife put 2. She put 2 in 16 years, and even she overestimated. All right. So one of the things that has been so central to the journey of the two of us is how do you manage all the expectations you didn't know you had, or maybe you had, and then how do you manage disappointing each other? I mean, my wife did not marry a chunky bald guy.
Yeah, I came across some some high school photos of you for rugby or something.
Yes, I was buff.
Let's get you back.
I know, dude. Seriously, I know. We'll do a podcast on food someday.
Okay.
I know. Oh, I know. So my poor wife. So I look in the mirror and I just go, she didn't marry this. She did not dream of this guy when she was 16 years old, thinking about, what her future husband will be like. So we'll bring on Mrs. Erre someday about all the ways Mr. Erre has dropped the ball. That one will definitely not be 30 minutes. Let's just say that. All right. So close your eyes wherever you are right now. Trust that Jesus will take the wheel if you're driving. Trust it. Trust it.
Talk about faith.
Trust it. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance to you and give you peace. Brothers and sisters, thanks for letting us be a part of your life. If you wouldn't mind, go to iTunes and fill out a review.
Yeah.
If it's good. And
or
rate
if it's
us.
not good.
Okay. All right, Andy.
Yeah.
But particularly if it's good, fill it out. And thanks so much for all of you who contribute and ask questions and interact with us and make fun of us, and the gentleman that started the Pray for Justy hashtag after the last podcast and realized, oh, she's amazing. What'd she do with that clown? That's a whole different conversation. Here's what my wife said. All right. Here's what she said. These are actual words. She said, your personality makes you more attractive. That's what she said. She said those words. Oh, she's peeking in right now and she's nodding. Anything you want to say, baby? We just talked about the soulmate.
You're my soulmate, babe.
Oh, she ruined it. No. She ruined it. The whole thing.
You had me at hello.
Oh, Sleepless in Seattle.
No.
Oh, no, Jerry Maguire.
Oh, I've never seen that movie. Okay. I'm sorry, baby, I'm sorry.
You lost me. You are no longer my soulmate.
Whoa! Okay, we're going to edit all that out.
No.
And my sweet wife, whom I love. All right, so brothers and sisters, until next time.
Thanks for listening to Vox, the Mike Erre podcast. Be sure to like Mike on Facebook at facebook.com/official Mike Erre. Follow Mike on Twitter and Periscope at Mike Erre for live interaction and ongoing Q&A. Don't forget to visit subversivekingdom.com for further engagement and information about Mike.